waiting for Kate too.
It would be here.
How many do we need for a quorum?
We need 4.
Okay. We can't use 2 pictures of Vicky then, right?
Kelly, I'm checking the remote landing page and I don't see the video coming up. It is streaming on the YouTube.
Okay, let me look into that. Hold on.
And we also have a registered participant who said that he's getting a message that he's been removed and wants to get back. He should be able to just go back to the link and get back in, right?
Yes.
It looks like it's one of the presenters for the Great River, and he still is having a challenge getting in. Okay, the live stream is fixed. We're still waiting on Kate. Do we want to go ahead and start letting people in?
I just texted Kate, told her we needed her to start the meeting.
I'm gonna go ahead and start letting the members of the public in.
Okay.
Are we gonna have?
Want to be able to hear it.
I've muted everybody because we're experiencing some feedback from somebody on the line.
I'm going to go ahead and start the record.
To those of you who just joined us, we're waiting for our fourth planning commissioner, and so we can have a quorum and start the meeting. I don't see Kate Willis on the line, but I just want to make sure she's not calling in from another phone number. Kate, are you with us on the call?
Chair McIntyre, this is Jency. We have a registered participant that has been removed from the meeting. I have tried to send a direct link and let them re-register, and it is still not letting them in. So I have asked him to try to maybe call in, but just to let you know that it's Mike, is it Gunlock? Russ probably knows. He is on the list, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to want to let him back in.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully it can call in.
Chair McIntyre, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, this is Kate Willis. I am on the line.
Thank you, Kate. Okay. Are we ready to start the meeting then? Jency?
Yes, I think we can begin.
Okay. Okay. Welcome, commissioners, staff, and public to the meeting. To ensure public safety but increase participation, Wasco County has been hosting virtual meetings during COVID-19 restrictions. With the governor's order to lift COVID-19 restrictions, Wasco County will be returning in the near future to in-person meetings with the option of virtual participation. Staff has prepared a public participation guide on how to use Zoom that is posted on the Planning Commission's agenda and minutes and remote meetings web pages. The hearing is also available to live stream via YouTube and on the Wasco County website. May we have the roll call, please?
I'll start.
Vicky
Mike,
Ashley.
Kelly?
Vicky Ashley present.
Mike Davis, Ty Valley present.
Kate Willis is here. We heard from her, and then Chair McIntyre.
Present.
And Russell Hargrave present.
And then let's hear from staff. I'm Kelly Housley Glover, Long Range Special Projects Planner and Interim Planning Director. And I'm also joined by staff today. Yeah,
Woody, Associate Planner.
And Jency Smith, Planning Coordinator.
Lynn, are
Yes.
you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Not on my own PC, so thank you.
Okay. I think maybe it's important to clarify that, Russ, you won't be participating in the discussion with planning commissioners, correct? You will.
Not around that hearing, no.
Thank you. All right, this meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available. All participants must mute themselves unless they are speaking. Lines providing feedback while not speaking will be muted to ensure others can hear. Only you can unmute yourself using the mic icon. If you are participating by phone, unmute yourself by dialing *6. Participants behaving inappropriately will be promptly removed from the meeting. The chair will invite participants for public comment at the appropriate time, so please be patient and wait to be called on. Please refrain from using the chat feature unless directed by the chair, as it will distract from the intended flow of the hearing procedure. At this time, we'll have public comment on items not listed on the agenda, and we'll ask that speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes. So if any person wants to comment on something that is not on the agenda, You may unmute your mic and share comments you have for items, again, not listed on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to provide comment on items not on the agenda? You can raise your hand on your Zoom at the bottom, or raise it in the picture if we can see you. Okay, hearing no comments for items not on the agenda, we'll move on to approval of past minutes. Are there any revisions or corrections to the minutes of June 1st, 2021? Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes as stated from the June 1, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second, this is Willis.
All in favor of approval of the minutes of June 1st, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Okay, thank you. Minutes approved. At this time, we'll open the hearing. The public hearing is open for the purpose of Planning Commission's consideration for the land use application file number 921-21-000024 PLNG. A property line adjustment replat to adjust a common property line between an 80.21 acre parcel known as 2N12E0700 and a 155.9 acre parcel, also 2N12E19100, resulting in a parcel, resulting in a parcel of 83.77 acres, 2N12E0700, and a 152.34 acre parcel, excuse me, 2N12E19100. A conditional use permit to construct and operate a youth camp in the Forest F2 zone. The youth camp will provide camp services for 65 days per year. Also a conditional use permit to construct and operate a cemetery in the Forest F2 zone and a cemetery subdivision to create 6.51 acre, 2,182 burial plots measuring 10 by 13 each cemetery from a 152.34 acre parcel. The subject properties are located west of Dry Creek Road and east of Carroll Road, approximately 0.2 miles south of the intersection of Carroll Road and Digger Road, approximately 1.6 miles north of Carroll Road and Osborne Cutoff Road, approximately 2.5 miles south of Mosier, Oregon, more specifically described as map tax lot 2N12E19100, account 376/1522, and 2N12E0700, account 372. The criteria for approval of the land use decisions include Chapter 2, Development Approval Procedures, Chapter 3, Basic Provisions, Section 3.120, Forest F2 Zone, Subsection 3.124J, Uses Permitted Subject to Standards Type 2 Review, Subsection 3.125U, Subsection 3.125W, Uses Permitted Subject to Conditional Use Review Type 2 or Type 3, Section 3.126 Conditional Use Approval Standards, Section 3.1265 Prohibited Uses, Section 3.127 Property Development Standards, Section 3.128 Parcel Size Standards, Chapter 5 Conditional Use Review, Chapter 10 Fire Safety Standards, Partition, Chapter 20 Site Plan Review, Chapter 21 Land Divisions, Chapter 21 Land Divisions, Section 21.030 Basic Provisions and Design Standards, and Section 21.200 Preliminary Subdivision Plan Approval. The proposed development must comply with applicable provisions contained in the Wasco County Comprehensive Plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with the LUDO, it's considered consistent with the comprehensive plan. Anyone can speak for or against the proposal today. However, only those who have party status will be able to appeal a decision reached by this commission. If you want party status, say so at the beginning of your testimony. Automatic standing is provided to the following parties. A, the applicant and all owners or contract purchasers of record as shown in the files of the Wasco County Assessor's Office of the property which is a subject of the application. B, all property owners of record as provided in A above within the notification area as described in section 2.080A2 of the property which is the subject of the application. C, any affected unit of local government or public district or state or federal agency. D, any other person or his representative who is specifically, personally, or adversely affected in the subject matter as determined by the approving authority. E, any person who is heard by the Planning Commission orally or in writing before the close of the hearing. Procedures. The procedure we will follow tonight is first, Planning Department staff will present their report. Then the applicant or owner will have the opportunity to testify. The commission will then call upon anyone who wishes to testify in favor of or in opposition to the proposed use. The applicant or owner will then have the opportunity to rebut. Once there is no further testimony from parties who have not testified, the commission will then decide if it is appropriate to close the public hearing. Once the hearing is closed, the commission may ask questions, deliberate, and then vote on a decision. The rules of evidence are as follows. No person shall present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony or evidence. If you have submitted written comments, please do not restate it in oral testimony unless you have further information to add. B, evidence received shall be of a quality that is reasonable persons rely upon in the conduct of their daily affairs. C, testimony and evidence must be directed toward the criteria applicable to the subject hearing. D, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes further appeal based on that issue. E, any party of record may request the record remain open for at least 7 days prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing. F, failure of persons to participate in the public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes that person's right of appeal to the Board of Commissioners. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Disclosure of interest, ex parte contact. Does any commission member wish to disqualify themselves for any personal or financial interest in this matter? Russ, you're muted.
Yeah, I wish to recuse myself as I am the applicant.
Thank you. Does any commission member wish to report any significant ex parte or pre-hearing contacts?
This is Kate Willis. I did have a contact with Kathleen Dalkey, and but it was not of any significance. She just was inquiring about wildfire concerns.
Okay. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the right of any commission member to hear this matter? Is there any member of the audience who wishes to question the jurisdiction of this body to act on behalf of Wasco County in this matter? Okay, at this time, could we please have Any participant mute themselves and hold off questions till the end of staff's presentation. Meeting host will mute if needed. And could we please have the staff presentation now?
All right, can you all see this presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, my name is Daniel Doherty. I'm Associate Planner with Wasco County, and I was a staff reviewer for Great River LLC's application. So tonight we're just going to go briefly over, provide an overview of the requests, as well as kind of talk briefly about the subject area involved. And then we're going to really dig into the actual 4 independent requests that have been wrapped up in this single application for a property line adjustment replat, a conditional use permit for a youth camp, a conditional use permit for a cemetery, and a cemetery subdivision. So it's important to point out that the property line adjustment or replat is the only request that involves 2 separate tax lots 100 and 700. The rest of the requests for the youth camp, cemetery, and cemetery subdivision involve the post property line adjustments tax lot 100. Let's move into the vicinity map surrounding zones. As you can see, the 2 subject tax lots are in the Forest F280 zone. The subject tax lot 100 is surrounded. All of the adjacent properties are within the Forest F280 zone. Moving north of the subject parcels, you have properties within the exclusive farm use A1160 and A140 exclusive farm use zone. And then further east, you have smaller parcels that are within either Forest Farm FF10 or Rural Residential RR10. So in talking about vegetation, this is a satellite image from 2018. I wasn't able to get a 2021 satellite image, but you can see that the east and south side of tax lot 100 is heavily vegetated with mature tree growth, and that the north and west side of the parcel contain intermittent mature tree growth in areas of native grasslands where tree growth is sparse. I provided this in the presentation because there were some folks that were commented about wanting to know a little bit more detail on slopes. This is not in the staff report, but I decided to put this in the hearing. As you can see, slopes are fairly steep at 31 to 54% on the east side of tax lot 100. But the majority of the area where the proposed developments and youth camp operation, as well as the cemetery operation held, contains slopes ranging from 0 to 30%. So we'll go ahead and dive into the property line adjustments and replat requests. So I'm just going to read the scope. The property line adjustment replat request is for an adjustment to a common property line between an 80.21 acre parcel and a 155.9 acre parcel, resulting in an 83.77 acre parcel and a 152.34 acre parcel. So this request in the normal circumstances is allowed, subject to standards type 2 administrative review and decision. The Planning Commission has authority to review this application under section 2.060 subsection B14, matters with which the director elects not to review. So it was really bundled into this one application. So property development standards require the proposed property line adjustment replat meet property line setbacks, as well as floodplain and waterway resource buffers, standards for outdoor lighting, signage, proposed building height, driveways, and automobile parking must also be met. These same property development standards will be applied to the other 3 requests. Staff finds that the application with recommended conditions of approval comply with the property development standards found in this section. So as you can see, in blue is the existing property line. In red is the proposed property line. I just wanted to give you a visual of this. So there were comments concerning EPD8, so I wanted to throw this into the hearing. The two subject parcels are located within the areas designated Sensitive Wildlife Habitat Overlay or Environmental Protection District 8, EPD8, and within the Transitions Land Study Area. Section 3.923 exempt areas provides that those parcels within both the EPD8 overlay and the Transitions Land Study Area are exempt from further review. Chapter 10 Fire Safety Standards. Concerning this is Section 10.230 Fire Safety Mitigation Plan for Land Divisions. This, however, is not a land division, but an adjustment. However, the preliminary property line adjustment replat application materials meets the requirements of the Fire Safety Mitigation Plan. So moving into Chapter 21 Land Divisions. So sections 21030 through 21130 require the preliminary property line adjustment replat meets preliminary plat standards that include but are not limited to the conformance with the comprehensive master plan, minimum parcel size, and other development standards of the underlying zone, street access criteria, and utility and water course plat requirements. The final property line adjustment replat must be recorded before any operations pertaining to the conditional use permits for the cemetery or youth camp can be authorized. So this is the property line adjustment replat is step 1. Staff finds that with recommended conditions of approval, the request meets all standards within the Chapter 21 land divisions. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary property line adjustment replat plan as submitted by the applicant. So moving on to the conditional use permit for a youth camp, we're going to primarily focus on, based on comments received, we're going to primarily focus on fire safety, water related issues, and roads and access. I do want to read the scope and cover very briefly some preliminary sections. Okay, so the scope of this proposed youth camp will provide a summer camp, an outdoor school, and day custom camp sessions for 65 days per year. Youth camp operations will have capacity for up to 60 overnight campers per session with approximately 10 staff members, adult chaperones, and/or volunteers, so 70 total overnight per session. During the 65-day operation schedule, the youth camp will accommodate a total of 260 overnight child camp participants and approximately 100 staff members, adult chaperones, and volunteers. The youth camp will accommodate a total of 1,010 child campers, that's day use and overnight, averaging 16 children per day on site during the 16-day per year operation schedule. So the request for the youth camp may be permitted subject to a conditional use review, Planning Commission having authority to review this application under section 2.060 subsection B14. The youth camp is allowed subject to meeting the Oregon Administrative Rule OAR 660.006 0031. Now this is the bulk of the criteria oriented explicitly towards the youth camp. So the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance defines a youth or family camp as an area devoted to facilities and equipment for camp purposes for youths and adults, including swimming pools, tennis courts, recreational fields, and facilities for meetings, conferences, or retreats, including facilities for eating and sleeping accommodations that are provided in connection with the camp. Now, Oregon Administrative Rule 660.006.031 subsection 3 defines a youth camp as a facility either owned or leased and operated by a state or local government. Nonprofit corporation is defined under Oregon Revised Statute 65.001 to provide an outdoor recreational and educational experience primarily for the benefit of persons 21 years of age or younger. Youth camps do not include any manner of juvenile detention center or juvenile detention facility. Based on application materials, Great River, Oregon, a nonprofit corporation, has a lease from Great River LLC to operate the proposed youth camp and to provide outdoor recreation and educational experiences for youths on the Great River property. The proposed scope of operations with conditions of approval meets the explicit definitions of youth camp. An approved use by the Planning Commission for a youth camp on the subject parcel pertains only to the scope of operations provided for in the application materials. This was another issue with regards to comments. Folks wanted to know a little bit more about whether or not the camp could expand without actually coming back for further land. So this is an illustration of the post property line adjustment delineation of the parcel, the 152.34 acre parcel. And as you can see, the camp as well as the cemetery, the proposed cemetery is within this parcel. All right, so we're going to go over property development standards very briefly here. Property development standards, again, require that the buildings within the buildings for the youth camp operations meet property line setbacks, water resource buffers, floodplain, etc. There are 8 existing buildings that will be modified, repaired, or replaced and used for youth camp operations. Now, these buildings were and are pre-existing. Some were damaged or destroyed during last year's fire. However, the building locations will not be moved for this application. All buildings currently meet property line setbacks as well as resource buffer setbacks. With recommended conditions of approval limiting on-site lighting, proposed building height, on-site signage, and requiring a road approach permit, the request complies with all property development standards. All right, so now we're going to move to the part of this briefing, which involves fire-related criteria mitigation requirements. From OAR 660.006.0031 subsection 7 and OAR 660.006.0035, we get a bulk of the fire criteria mitigation requirements. And then, of course, those requirements and meeting those requirements help significantly to meet the Chapter 5 conditional use review fire mitigation requirements, as well as Chapter 10 fire safety standards. So let's begin with OAR 660.006.0031 subsection 7 and OAR 0035. So we'll cover OAR 0035 first. So in part, subsection 1 provides that the dwelling shall be located upon a parcel within a fire protection district or shall be provided with residential fire protection by contract. The subject parcel is served by the Mosier Fire District for structural protection and the Oregon Department of Forestry for wildfire protection. Subsection 2 in part provides that access roads shall meet road design standards described in OAR 660.006.0040. So this rule provides in part the governing body shall establish road design standards which ensure that public roads, bridges, private roads, and driveways are constructed so as to provide adequate access for firefighting equipment. So the request will use the existing paved 16 to 20 foot wide road network for access throughout the parcel, and no new private driveways or access roads are proposed. Carroll Road and Benzel Road provide public access to the subject parcel. Staff inquired with the Wasco County Public Works Director Arthur Smith concerning public road capabilities regarding firefighting equipment. Director Smith replied, quote, Carroll Road and Benzel Road are both county maintained local roads and that they can provide adequate access for firefighting equipment, end quote. Subsection 3 provides that primary and secondary fuel break standards be followed in accordance with the recommended fire siting standards for dwellings and structures and fire safety standards for roads published by the Oregon Department of Forestry dated March 1st, 1991. So these standards require a primary fuel break zone extending 30 feet in all directions and a secondary fire fuel break zone extending out for a minimum of 100 feet in all directions. A condition of approval is included. It requires a 100-foot fire fuel break be provided and maintained around each of the proposed structures. Now, subsections 4, 5, and 6 of OAR 0035 require that the dwelling shall have a fire retardant roof. The dwellings will not be placed on slopes greater than 40%, and that chimneys contain spark arresters. Application materials and conditions of approval meet the stated standards. And so subsection 6 of OAR 0035 is the last subsection within that rule. Now, OAR 0035 is required under OAR 660.006.0031 subsection 7A. So we're going to go ahead and move into subsection 7B. Subsection 7B requires the applicant develop a fire protection plan that includes fire prevention measures, on-site tree suppression measures, and the establishment and maintenance of fire-safe areas in which camp participants can gather in the event of a fire. So in order to meet these criteria, conditions of approval require the following. Clear dead wood and trim lower branches on trees. Provide at least 6,000 gallons of water and storage tanks on site with a functional standpipe for every structure. Create and maintain the emergency gathering area that's identified on the site plan. Ensure that all cemetery and youth camp staff and youth camp participants are familiarized with camp fire emergency evacuation standard operating procedures. Implement and maintain the submitted fire protection and prevention plan for the life of the permit. So in part, the fire protection and prevention plan provides that water from the on-site well is stored or will be stored in the 30,000 gallon steel water tank located at the highest point of the property, and that water from that tank will be distributed throughout the parcel and can be accessed for firefighting from the standpipes. So there's a standpipe adjacent to each structure, and all standpipes have a 2-inch pipe thread output with a removable screw cap allowing firefighters to connect. So moving on to subsection 7C, requires that a youth camp's on-site fire suppression capability include a 1,000-gallon mobile water supply that can access the entire camp and a 30-gallon per minute water pump, adequate hose and nozzles, as well as a sufficient number of firefighting hand tools and trained personnel capable of operating all fire suppression equipment at the camp during designated periods of fire danger. So moving on to chapter 5, conditional use review, section 5.020 subsection C provides in part the proposed use will not exceed or significantly burden fire protection services. So in this, staff analyzed the submitted and condition mitigation measures from OAR 660.006.0031 and 0035, as well as Wasco County's chapter 10 fire safety standards. We received commentary from Mosier Fire Chief Mike Renault and Oregon Department of Forestry Wildland Fire Supervisor Keel Nairns. Additional opportunity for comment was provided on June 6th and June 16th, 2021. So both firefighting experts provided substantive comments concerning the submitted fire protection and prevention plan and the proposal's adherence to chapter 10 fire safety standards. And so based on the aforementioned, staff found that the proposal will not exceed or significantly burden fire protection services. So chapter 10 fire safety standards is the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance, has 5 applicable sections. Siting sections requires the buildings avoid slopes steeper than 40% and are set back from the top of slopes greater than 30% by 50 feet. Buildings cannot avoid 50-foot setback from 30% slopes. Fire mitigation plan must be submitted. Application materials and analysis of Wasco County GIS topographic maps indicate and confirm that the existing 8 buildings identified in the application avoid slopes steeper than 40% and are set back from the top of slopes greater than 30% by at least 50 feet. Section 10.120 requires a 50-foot fire fuel break. This is met with a 100-foot conditioned fire fuel break for each building. Section 10.130 requires fireproofing materials, spark arresters, and decks and other openings utilize fire mitigation materials and techniques. The section also requires trees and utility areas be kept up and clean. And that standpipes must be located within 50 feet of each building. So application materials and conditions of approval meet the aforementioned mitigation requirements. Section 10.140 requires driveways to meet standards for improved all-weather driveway surface and minimum driveway widths. Turnouts must be provided for driveways over 200 feet, and the driveway provide adequate access for emergency vehicles, and that signage be provided for emergency responders. It's important to remember that this is for new driveways. No new road or driveways are proposed. The existing paved road network is 16 foot to 20 foot wide and contains turnout opportunities every quarter mile or less. The road network is a single large loop and is navigable from the entrance at Carroll Road to the exit at Carroll Road without forcing vehicles to actually stop, back up, and turn around. Conditions of approval require the turnouts to be maintained and open to all vehicles, and that the Mosier Fire Department possess keys to all entryway gates. Condition of approval also requires all signs, directional on-site water source, electrical shutoff at power pole, or off-grid power source and property address to be legible and maintained in good repair, and that all signs shall be in place on the site plan prior to the issuance of any kind of building approval. Finally, section 10.150 requires on-site water for dwellings in excess of 3,500 square feet. On-site water will be provided again by the 30,000 gallon steel water tank located at the highest point of the property, and that water will be distributed throughout the property to the standpipes. Conditions of approval, of course, require 6,000 gallons of water, which is provided from the 30,000 gallon steel water tank, and of course the 1,000 gallon mobile water supply that's accessible to the entire lot or to the entire parcel. Okay, so this is a map of the entire parcel. As you can see, circled in red at the south end of the parcel is existing water tank. Moving north, you can see the road network, how it's one continuous large loop. And then at the very top, highlighted in orange, is a 12-foot wide pedestrian access. Now this pedestrian access provides access to the cemetery block, but it can also be used as an emergency evacuation route. Moving further north, and this is where the bulk of the youth camp proposal is. You can see circled in red the various standpipes. I do want to point out that the standpipe nearest the caretaker residence was not on the original site plan, but communication with the applicant confirmed that that there is a standpipe within 50 feet of the proposed caretaker residence. Staff just placed this on here for demonstrative purposes. Further north is the emergency gathering area highlighted in yellow. It's situated between the bulk of the youth camp operations as well as the further north cemetery operations. You can also see the circled standpipes. More standpipes. You have two located near the Welcome Center, one located near the maintenance building, and one located near the proposed lawnmower shed. There's also standpipes that aren't necessarily next to individual proposed buildings. And there's a standpipe located near the block 1, block 2, and 3 of the proposed cemetery. So based on conditions of approval found throughout the staff report concerning fire safety and mitigation and expert commentary, staff found that the request meets all related fire safety and mitigation criteria. So moving on to water related criteria. So there are two specific criteria provided for that address water related issues. Criteria provided in OAR 660.006.0031 subsection 4G and in the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance, Chapter 5, Conditional Use Review, Section 5.020, subsection C. So OAR 0031 subsection 4G requires that a youth camp shall not interfere with the exercise of legally established water rights on adjacent properties. So in determining this, staff reached out to Oregon Water Resources Department, District 3 Water Master Robert Wood. Staff is informed by the application materials as well as Mr. Wood that the subject parcel is right to use up to 5,000 gallons per day. The application provides that ground irrigation will be minimal and that water use will be primarily for kitchen and lavatory sinks and toilets and not exceed 5,000 gallons per day. The youth camp only has a 65-day per year operating window. And application materials ultimately provided that the youth camp will not interfere with the exercise of legally established water rights on adjacent properties. So further review of water-related issues under Chapter 5, 5.020 subsection C provides in part the proposed use will not exceed or significantly burden water facilities and services available to the area. So continued conversation with Mr. Woods concerning the proposed youth camp scope of operations. Mr. Wood provided comment that if the proposal pumps the well into a tank or cistern of sufficient size, there should be enough water for a youth camp. On-site water again will be provided from a 30,000 gallon steel water tank located at the highest point of the property. Based on application materials and expert commentary, staff found that the request meets water impacts related criteria. Moving on to road and access related criteria. So we've already covered criteria of OAR 660.006.0040 and Chapter 10 Fire Safety Standards access standards. So I won't cover those again, but I will go into Chapter 3, Section 3.127, subsection G, requires the applicants obtain a road approach permits from the Wasco County Public Works Department. This is conditioned. Chapter 5, Section 5.020, subsection C and D provide in part the proposed use will not exceed or significantly burden road facilities available to the area and will not unduly impair traffic flow or safety in the area. So application materials provide that persons accessing the cemetery and youth camp will either take exit 69 from Interstate 84 into Mosier, continue on to State Road and then onto Carroll and Wenzel Road to the subject parcel, or from the Dalles, take State Road to Carroll and Wenzel Road onto the subject parcel. Interstate 84 is a major 4-lane east-west interstate freeway that's provided by our 2009 Wasco County Transportation Plan. State Road or 7 Mile Road is classified as a major collector in the 2009 Wasco County Transportation Plan, and it's designed to handle between 400 and 2,000 average daily trips. Carroll and Wenzel Road are classified as rural local roads in the 2009 Wasco County Transportation Plan, and it's designed to handle a maximum of 250 average daily trips. So the annual number of interments when the cemetery is fully developed is provided by the applicant are estimated to be approximately 35 per year. They use the guidelines from the Trip Generation Manual. This estimate would generate 5 round trips per day on average, or about 1,825 round trips annually. The traffic load from the youth camp operation is estimated to be fewer than 500 round trips per year. Now, I wanted to point out that the table provided in the staff report provided the incorrect table. However, it doesn't alter the findings because the findings were still based on the verbiage, not necessarily just the table. So the table you're looking at highlighted in orange and outlined in red is the actual table that should have been provided in the staff report. All right, so as you can see by the table and per the application materials, provided that the maximum number of combined round trips annually would be approximately 2,400 or 6.5 trips per day. Now the table actually underestimates that, whereas the verbiage provided to 2,400. So as you can see, the 2,268 would have an average daily trip of 6.2, or even 2,400 trips would be an average of 6.5 trips per day. Further application materials did provide if a funeral occurred at the same time as a camp session was beginning, the peak traffic could be as high as 70 vehicles in a single day. Analysis of the cemetery and youth camp's proposed scope of operations by the Wasco County Public Works Department Director Arthur Smith provides that the quote, development should not adversely impact the county roads or significantly increase our maintenance in this area, end quote. Concerning Chapter 10 access standards, Mr. Smith provided that, quote, Carroll Road and Wenzel Road are both county maintained local roads and that they can provide adequate access for firefighting equipment, end quote. Based on the application, conditions of approval, and expert commentary, staff found that the request meets all road and access related criteria. Staff recommends approval of the youth camp conditional use permit at plan as submitted by the applicant. All right, moving now to the conditional use permit for the cemetery and cemetery subdivision. We're going to focus primarily on state laws regarding cemetery operations and the creation of a cemetery subdivision, but I do want to read the scope and go over some preliminary sections. So the scope is that this is a request for a conditional use permit to construct and operate a green cemetery in the forest zone and to create a 6.51 acre cemetery subdivision from a 152.34 acre parcel. Additionally, 4 out of the 8 existing buildings will be repaired, modified, or replaced in their existing conditions to be used for cemetery operations. So the Cemetery and Cemetery Subdivision Review Authority, Cemetery Subdivision Review Authority for the Planning Commission falls under section 2.060 subsection B3. The proposed creation and operation of a cemetery is reviewable by the Planning Commission under section 2.060 subsections B14. The Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance defines a cemetery as land dedicated for burial purposes, including mortuary, crematory, mausoleum, and columbarium, when operated within the boundary of the cemetery. So based on application materials, the creation and dedication of 6.51 acres for burial lots and the administration of cemetery business, burial ceremonies, and burials meets the definition of a cemetery. The storage and preparation of the deceased on cemetery grounds or within any of the structures used in conjunction with the cemetery is not proposed. Property development standards require the buildings used for cemetery operations meet property line setbacks, as well as floodplain and waterway resource buffers, as noted earlier, as well as standards for outdoor lighting, signage, proposed building height, driveways, automobile parking. 8 existing buildings will be modified, repaired, or replaced, and 4 of those buildings will be shared between the cemetery and youth camp. The Welcome Center will be shared between the cemetery and youth camp for operations and administration, and the remaining 3 buildings will be used for groundskeeping, maintenance, and security purposes for both proposed uses. Again, building locations will not be moved. All of the buildings meet property line setbacks and resource buffer standards. Staff finds that recommended conditions of approval, limiting on-site lighting, proposed building height, and on-site signage, and requiring a road approach permit. The request complies with all of the property line or property development standards criteria. Parcel size standards are met per section 3.128, which allows parcel size or cemetery subdivisions to be created under the allotted 80 acre minimum parcel size. As you can see from this map, block 1 is the largest cemetery block, followed by block 2 and 3. This is a zoomed in picture of the proposed cemetery blocks. And for visual purposes, I wanted to put this in there. Each cemetery block requires at least a 6-foot access easement for folks to be able to go ahead and access the individual burial lots. Okay. So concerning Chapter 5 conditional use permit, sections 5.020 through 5.040, staff finds that the scope of the cemetery with recommended conditions of approval ensure the proposed use will not exceed or significantly burden public facilities and services available in the area. Request to operate a cemetery on the subject parcel complies with Chapter 5. Chapter 10, sections 10.110 through 10.150, staff finds that fire mitigation measures with recommended conditions of approval applicable to both the cemetery and youth camp ensure the proposed uses conform to required fire safety standards criteria. Concerning Chapter 21, sections 21.030 and 21.200, basic provisions and design standards, as well as preliminary subdivision plan approval. It's important to remember that cemetery subdivisions are actually unique from residential subdivisions and don't necessarily create a complete and separate unit of land usable for residential use, but instead dedicate specifically a piece of land for cemetery use only. Staff finds that the preliminary cemetery subdivision plan with recommended conditions of approval conform to land division basic provisions, design criteria, and preliminary subdivision plan standards. All right, so now moving into Oregon revised statutes. Oregon revised statute 692.275 requires the applicant obtain a certificate of authority for operating a cemetery, crematorium, or facility for final disposition, as well as deals with fees, registration of certain cemeteries, and rules applicable to crematoriums. Staff is recommending, based on additional information provided by the applicant and a further reading of ORS 692.275 and ORS 97.460, staff recommends striking the condition of approval number 4 located on page 8 within the Planning Commission packet under the heading Proposed Cemetery Subdivision Conditions of Approval. This condition of approval requires the applicant obtain a certificate of authority before the final plat may be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. And so the reason for this new recommendation is upon reading the Oregon State Mortuary and Cemetery Board's 2015 guidelines for Oregon cemeteries, it appears that the applicant must obtain final plat approval, file the final plat with the county clerk, and dedicate the subdivision for cemetery purposes before the Oregon State Mortuary and Cemetery Board will issue a certificate of authority. And so that was a recommendation to strike condition of approval number 4 located on page 8 of the Planning Commission packet. So ORS 97.310 through 97.330 concerns primarily surveying and subdivision of land for cemetery purposes, access easements for grave lots, filing cemetery maps and plats, and dedication of land for cemetery purposes, as well as holding and occupying the land exclusively for cemetery purposes. Staff finds that the scope of the cemetery, the preliminary subdivision plat, and recommended conditions of approval meet the requirements of these statutes. And finally, ORS 97.460. This concerns the requirements for the establishment of a cemetery or burial park. So in order to lay out, open up, or use any property for cemetery or burial park purposes, the applicant must be the owner of the property, must obtain written consent from the Planning Commission or governing body to operate a cemetery. And of course, that's kind of the reasoning, well, that is the reasoning behind why staff recommends striking that condition. The applicant must agree to maintain records of the disposition of human remains on the property, must agree to disclose the disposition of human remains upon sale of the property, and must provide to the State Mortuary and Cemetery Board a list of the Planning Commission or governing body requirements for laying out, opening up, or using property in the county for cemetery or burial purposes. So the notice of decision, report, conditions of approval. So staff finds that the preliminary cemetery subdivision plan with recommended conditions of approval meets Oregon revised statutes criteria required to subdivide and dedicate land for cemetery purposes and open and operate a cemetery in Wasco County. Staff recommends approval of the cemetery conditional use permit plan as submitted by the applicant, as well as approval of the preliminary cemetery subdivision plan as submitted by the applicant. Comments that were received timely were addressed in the staff report, as well as a supplemental edition of comments received after the Planning Commission packet was created and noticed. And I open it up for questions.
Thank you, Daniel. Do any commissioners have any questions?
This is Vicky. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was there a pump test done on the well?
For this application, staff received no information from the applicant concerning a pump test or current pump test.
So then my follow-up question is there sufficient water to keep that tank full for the pressure for the fire hoses?
Based on Robert Wood's commentary to me, the applicant has 5,000 gallons allocated to him, and that's the 30,000 gallon cistern would be sufficient. However, I cannot answer your direct question with regards to whether it is sufficient for firefighting purposes. However, commentary received by Mosier's Fire Chief as well as ODF concerning the proposal made no comments or had no concerns about that issue.
Any other commissioner questions?
This is Kate Willis. Daniel, you mentioned that technically everything complies with wildfire safety. I'm wondering what's the non-technical concern? Are there any non-technical concerns?
Well, in terms of meeting the stated criteria within Oregon administrative rules, as well as the Wasco County Land Use and Development Ordinance, the commentary from the firefighting experts, with the commentary from the firefighting experts, as well as all of the conditions of approval associated with fire mitigation, certainly meets the technical requirements. The non-technical requirements would most likely fall into the realm of the firefighting experts that made comments. As the staff reviewer, I can't necessarily get into the non-technical issues of firefighting because I'm not a firefighting expert. I hope that answers your question.
Any other commissioner?
I'm wondering whether we could get a little bit more feedback from the fire departments, I guess. I don't know. I feel like we need to understand this a little bit better, but thank you.
Other commissioner questions?
Chair,
Chair,
I have
I
a
have other
questions, but
questions, but I'm going to wait until after presentation by the applicant.
I seem to be getting some feedback here. Is that Vicky?
I can't help.
Can't help it.
Okay. Okay, other questions from commissioners? Okay, at this time, we'll allow the owner, the applicant, to testify. I will remind all participants to state their name and address for the record. We use this information to contact you about the decision. So this time, applicant, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Dan Meter. I'm the planning consultant with Tennyson Engineering here in the Dalles, and I've been asked by the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrave, to help them with this application. As you can see, we're all seated here in the Tennyson conference room. On my left would be your right, would be is Russell Hargrave, the proponent. On my right, your left, is Don Baird, retired senior Wasco County planner, and now a active planning consultant, working with both us and, as I understand it, back with the county for a while. Yep. And in the front row is Kirk Fatland. He's his new staff planner for Tennyson and has been with us about a year and a half. I have just recently retired from Tennyson Engineering, 50+ years with the firm, and I promised Mr. Hargrave last fall that I would help him with this project. So this is, in fact, my swan song in planning, and I think this is just a great project to finish my career. I want to first recognize Mr. Daniel for completing the daunting task of preparing the staff report for this project. It was no easy chore, and a well done is in order. That was some document you put together, Daniel. And I'd like to ask Mr. Hargrave to give the Planning Commission and the audience watching what his vision for this project is.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. My name is Russell Hargrave. I've lived in Mosier for 31 years, and my wife and I were married on our property in Mosier. I'm an outdoor person devoted to nature, hiking and running, but mostly to my wife and my children. I'm committed to Mosier, and I plan to live there the rest of my life. So what we're trying to accomplish might seem like a strange combination, but it's not to me, because I wanted a cemetery. Stephanie and I, and I'll explain why in a minute, wanted to create a cemetery that embraces the whole circle of life, not just the point of passing. We wanted a cemetery that embraced nature and that embraced life very broadly. And in order to do that, to manifest a cemetery that is the full circle of life, you very much need children to be a part of it, as well as obviously deceased and families. And so to accomplish this, there's really three aspects to this vision. One is the green cemetery. And so a green cemetery, for those not familiar with the term, is actually really a traditional cemetery. If you go back 100 or 150 years, it's the way all people were buried in this country. So it would be a simple pine box or other biodegradable material, could even be a shroud. There would be no embalming or harmful chemicals, no metal caskets, no concrete vault. It is to have a minimal impact on the land and the ecosystem. And the idea is that when a green cemetery is utilized, there's no change. There's no visible change to the land. It should continue to look the same. And that's very much the goal here. Another thing about green cemeteries, not a requirement, but it's really a joyous fact, is that families and friends often participate in the preparation as well as in the ceremony. So sometimes they'll help to build the casket. Very often they'll help and participate in the ceremony in some way. So this direct engagement is generally another aspect of the green cemetery. The children part, the idea is a cemetery that is the full circle of life, a cemetery that living people are comfortable visiting, that kids maybe came there with their family to visit grandma, but maybe they also went to camp there. So they have this deep connection, and I hope a deeper understanding of this aspect of life. We wanted to do outdoor education through the youth camp to provide children with constructive, enjoyable outdoor experiences and to an easy familiarity with natural burials, combined with training in outdoor safety and outdoor ecology. So you put these two things together, and through the lens of the planning applications, they are two different things, but it's really this one vision of a cemetery that's for the full circle of life and that families would enjoy visiting. I know where my grandmother is buried, and she was a very, very special person to me. It's very hard to get anyone to visit. There's absolutely nothing there. It's a plot. There's nowhere to sit even. So by going at it with such a large parcel, by combining the green cemetery, the outdoor education, we think we can help people come to grips with death and help people enjoy the outdoors and have a better understanding of how to interact with and maintain the outdoors safely. The third aspect of this vision is nature restoration and preservation. So most of this site, the vast majority of it, was a very large RV park. And so part of our vision is to remove most of that infrastructure and all of the debris. There is a lot of mess across these 150 plus acres. And we've been working since my wife and I acquired the property with two people that work for us, really every day, cleaning up the site. And we're in the process of restoring it to nature. It will take years to restore the whole site to nature, and I enjoy the task, and I'm glad to already be seeing some of the results. This spring, for example, we planted 4,000 trees, and that's because we were heavily impacted by the Mosier fire. So we're actively replanting those trees as well as removing infrastructure and debris to restore the land from the RV park use. Most of this land, there's three pieces: the green cemetery, outdoor education, but most of the land would be for nature conservation. And that's the vision, and that's what we hope will provide a cemetery that really achieves the goal of solace for the living and peaceful resting place for the deceased. Our goals, our mission statement at Great River is to enable experiences that connect people to each other and to the land. Our goals are to restore and conserve the natural diverse ecosystem, to provide a natural, peaceful resting place for the deceased, and to enable solace for those who grieve. To enable outdoor educational experiences that inspire curiosity, respect, and understanding of nature. That's the vision. And I want to explain why this is so important to us, why we're so passionate about doing this. When I first went into the Oregon Mortuary and Cemetery Board and explained our intentions to the director there, Chad Dresselhaus, he really took me aside and kind of put his arm around me and said, you know, nobody's going into the cemetery business. It's not a good business to go into. Have you really thought this through? So why is it so important to us? And I had the same talk with people when they learned we were going to do a youth camp. They're like, oh, that's even more headaches and less profitable. But it's really important to us for two reasons. And the first one came from my experience with my brother's passing. Both my younger brothers have died. And when my younger brother died, we had him cremated. And it has always been hard for me to reconcile his death. And probably part of it is death is just hard, especially if it's a younger brother. But for me, it was also because there was no memorial to him. There was no place. He wasn't buried. He was cremated. I have some of the ashes. All of the relatives have some of the ashes. What I really needed was a place where I could go and pretend to speak with him and maybe run into someone else that knew him and might have come there to think about him also. So when my mom, when it came time to think about her passing, and she was in Hawks Ridge and Hood River at that time, and it became clear that we needed to address that. And so I said to my wife, what do you think? And then very quickly we said to each other, what are we doing? And that's not something we had ever come to grips with before or discussed. And from that discussion came the creation of this vision and the formation of Great River, where my mother is currently buried. The second factor that makes us so passionate about this is our experience as a neighbor, first to the RV park for 19 years, and then after it went belly up, we were the largest neighbor to an abandoned RV park. The site has been abandoned for about 12 years. Both of those experiences were really poor. As an adjacent neighbor to the RV park, that was way too much density. 550 sites on a parcel this size, that number of people, that amount of use, that amount of noise. So that wasn't a good experience. And frankly, I wanted to, I was concerned that that might happen again at that level. And as an abandoned site, it was almost worse. It was a magnet for squatters, for vandalism. There were thefts of all kinds of things from the site itself, but as my neighbors have and I have worked together to respond to the squatters and vandals on the site, we'll call each other and say, hey, there's lights over there. We'll run over, we'll find people with a truck trying to haul stuff away. It turns out that that created a center for this kind of activity. And pretty soon we in the immediate neighborhood were also getting robbed. And I can't prove it, but I think once you have a large abandoned site like that that's not looked after, it is very hard for the adjacent neighbors to maintain security. Those are the reasons that really make us so passionate. The first one is the one that makes me get up in the morning and makes my heart swell. But the second one was a real headache. We want to make sure that we don't go back there because, as I said, we intend to live there forever, and we want to live in a peaceful, natural, harmonious place, and that's what we intend Great River to be the heart and soul of. I want to recognize the broad support that we've received from Mosier and from the Wasco County community overall. I want to thank the many people who did write letters of support, but I also want to recognize many more who have expressed support to me and to those of us working on the site. We've had a lot of people stop by and help. We had a lot of help planting those trees, for example. We've had a lot of help cleaning up from the fire, and I really appreciate the broad level of support we've gotten from all types, from the orchardists and traditional Mosier families, and also from recreationalists and people who look at nature just as fondly as the farmers, but from a different perspective. I also want to recognize that some community members have concerns. Excuse me, where's my water?
Thank you.
So I'd like to speak to those concerns as I understand them. First of all, fire. We have actively addressed the fire risk, and as soon as we bought the property, similar to what we have already been doing on the property we owned previously. So since we bought this property in the end of July last year, we've done substantial fuel reduction. We've identified and cleared and labeled the fire roads and produced a map for the fire departments. We have water supply working again, so we can now store a lot of water. 30,000 gallons is what we will store for the operation of the youth camp, as Daniel said, in a steel water tank that already exists on the site. But we have additional storage of water for fire use of over an additional 15,000 gallons. So nearly 50,000 gallons in total that we will store on site. And that is really important for firefighting. This means that fire trucks and tankers will be able to be provisioned with water right there at the top of the ridge, not have to go all the way down to Mosier Creek or to Mosier to take on water. That's really important. In fact, when Mike Renault visited the site, he's been out quite a bit. And I know, Kate, I heard you ask earlier about what is the feedback from the experts regarding fire. The Mosier Fire Chief, Mike Renault, is very familiar with the site. We had to fight the Mosier fire with the site as it was. We had just purchased it a few days before the fire. When he came up after we had been working there for about 4 months and took a look at it late last year, he said, wow, he was very relieved because of the extensive fuel reduction, because of the fire breaks, and the other measures that we had taken. So we've been working really closely both with the Oregon Department of Forestry, who has jurisdiction for the lands, and the Mosier Fire Department that would come and fight the structure fires. They work together, and we've been working with them together. In fact, Mike Renault and some of the 3 of the other Mosher firemen will be up there on site again tomorrow to examine the standpipes, to make sure they can use the maps and that they understand the way the signage is done on the road. So we're working very closely with them. And I can tell you, not only from what Mike said, but as a neighbor, there's always a fire risk, obviously. We need to be vigilant every minute, but the risk from that site is vastly reduced as a result of this work and the active attention that we're paying to it every day. Another concern is around security, and we have, since we've been working it, we've put gates on the entrances. We have installed security cameras, and we've been successful in stopping the trespassing, the vandalism, and the theft. And some of my adjacent neighbors on Carroll Road to the property have written emails to me of thanks for making this site safer and for implementing these security measures, because it affects the whole neighborhood. People aren't cruising through looking for things to steal anymore that I can see. Water is another concern, and I want to say that we're not obviously using anywhere near as much water as the traditional use of this site, and we're not going to irrigate the golf course. We're not going to be watering cemetery lawns. The green cemetery is going to leave the land as it is. We are very focused on water conservation, as everyone in that area is, and we are sure that we can stay within the limits. Someone asked earlier if a water test had been done. I have the well logs, and I've talked to people that were on site when it stopped operating. And I've also talked to Robert Wood, the water master. The well does not produce a lot of water, but it does produce enough for our uses. We've done a careful tabulation of what we'll use for operation. And, frankly, the largest use of the water is the capacity for fire. So being able to store the water for fire is the first thing we're doing with water. So we're confident we can stay within the limits. We're not using water where we don't have to, like irrigating the golf course or watering lawns. And the main thing we are doing with the water is providing a vast quantity of it to fight fires. I also heard or read concerns about light and noise. As an adjacent neighbor and a slightly higher hillside, light is very much a concern of mine also. And also think about the perspective of a green cemetery. Very important not to create light pollution. And we're trying to provide outdoor education in best practices. And light pollution is one of the, lack of light pollution rather, is one of the wonderful things about living where we live in Mosher. And we certainly want to work with all our neighbors in the community to make sure that it stays that way. With regard to noise, I hear a lot of noise out of my door from machinery. There's all kinds of machinery, farm machinery principally. It's not in our plans. We have a youth camp. The use of machinery, it's not central to our plans at all. The kind of noises that you might hear are literally children laughing, or perhaps music from a funeral memorial. But I think I can promise that light and noise pollution would not be a problem. So, in summary, as a longtime member of the Mosier community and the largest adjacent neighbor to the project, if you look at our property line with this project, it's huge. My wife and I, ask for your support and approval of our application. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions after Dan gets done with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Not going to take a lot of time here. The application is very complex and very detailed. The staff report, I think, was very well presented and has provided a very thorough understanding of the proposed project. Rather than dwell on site specifics, we're just going to offer a few points of clarification to the staff report so that everyone's on the same page. Now, the staff report contains 10 pages of recommended conditions of approval. And essentially, we concur with all of them and understand them and will abide by them. But there are a couple, 3 points we'd like to discuss that so there's a general understanding of what we think needs to be done. It needs a little bit of clarification. We understand and agree that the condition of approval that prohibits youth campers from using individual campsites with existing electrical and sewerage facilities. However, it needs to be noted that up to 35 of the existing campsites, of which there are over 500, would be used for tent camping for youth participants, but without water, sewer, or electric service. The sites are level, and we would place tents on approximately 35 of them, of the sites available, but we would not, and actually, Mr. Hargrave has indicated he's going to be removing that infrastructure as time allows. Second issue, we understand and agree that the condition of approval that prohibits the reactivation of the 9-hole golf course and the use of the swimming pool by the youth camp participants. We understand that's a requirement and we'll abide by that. However, it should be noted that there's an existing pickleball and half basketball court already on the property and that is planned to be used by the youth camp. No development is required as the facility is pre-existing and neither pickleball or basketball is listed in the listed as prohibited uses in the state statutes. We bring this to your attention now so there'll be no issues later with the youth camp participants using the pickleball court. We understand and agree the conditional approval that states food services shall be limited to the operation of the youth camp and shall be for youth camp participants, and that the sales of individual meals may be offered only to family members or guardians of the youth participants. Great River does not plan to offer food services for the public nor offer the sale of individual meals. However, the kitchen will be used by the youth camp and ceremony staff or the cemetery staff for their meals and would also be used to stage food that was brought in for life celebration or sales activities. Those are just what we're trying to do is set the playing field straight for how we see those conditions, those 3 conditions of approval. The rest of them are perfectly acceptable to us. Now, Russell has hit some of the issues that we know are concerns, and I want to just take a moment and address a couple of them too. The road use, as the staff report pointed out, Wasco County Public Works Department has determined the current roadway is in acceptable condition to serve the proposed project. Water use, making me a note. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're just informed that one of the commissioners needs to leave by 5. So we would respect their time and turn the time back over to the chair.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant at this time? Planning commissioners?
This is Vicki. I
Commissioner
have a
Willis,
question on the cemetery. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Will there be headstones or markers for the family?
Yeah, can I answer that, Lynn?
Yes, please.
Yeah, there would. We're working with the Green Burial Council to get national certification as green cemetery. And so the size and the way those markers look is something we're coordinating through their rules. But yes, we would allow headstones. We think that's important, an important option. And the stones would probably come from the site. They would probably be the same stones that are there. Some of those stones are Pomona basalt and would be suitable for engraving.
Okay.
Other planning commissioner questions for the applicant? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to audience participation. Are there any individuals with party status or members of the audience who wish to speak in favor of the proposal? Please state your name for the record. And we are asking you to limit your testimony to 3 minutes due to our time constraints. So
Hi, my name is Lisa Cosglow. Can you hear me?
yes.
Great. I'd like to, I work in Mosier, live in Hood River, and I run, well, I work all over the gorge, but I run kids' youth programs in the gorge. I've been running programs for the past 10 years, and I wanted to call in to voice my support of this program or this project. And I wanted to just explain a little bit of the challenges about getting kids outside. I work both for the public school, I work for one of the private schools, I work for my own company. I have a very small outdoor summer day camp program that I've run throughout the gorge for the past 10 years. And one of my biggest challenges, I run very small groups. I really focus on stewardship. I focus on connecting kids to the outdoors and to each other. I'm running pretty small scale groups, and I've run the program through the Hood River School District for the majority of that time that I've been operating. And even as part of the school district, it is incredibly difficult to gain access to public lands in order to take kids outside. And this is such a unique opportunity to have landowners like Russ and Stephanie that are enthusiastic about getting kids out on the land. And one of the things that I'm personally challenged with routinely is getting it's basically impossible to get kids onto any Forest Service land. Like the public land is so difficult to attain permits and bring children out onto the land that for a small operation like myself, there's just no way that I could bring kids out outside. And it's a bit of it feels like a little bit of a tragedy because in an era when we really want kids outside more, we want them away from screens, we want them connecting, we want them to have meaningful relationships with the land that they, in the place where they live. It's very, very difficult to do that in our area, both with the unique scenic area designation and surrounded by Forest Service. so I just wanted to say that this is such a unique opportunity to have Russ and Stephanie enthusiastically opening up their land for youth camp operations. And I just think it's a really, it's a unique opportunity. It makes me think of people who thought ahead when the times when we started, our national parks and our state parks. And I know this is not a park application, but it's just such a unique opportunity we don't know when the next time we'd have a landowner that has access to this much land, that this willing to open up the place to allow children out onto the land to be able to learn and connect with the place where they live.
That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yep. You're welcome.
Okay, any other person who wishes to speak in favor of the proposal? Unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record. If you've registered.
Good afternoon. Oh,
yes.
Good afternoon. This is Mary and Ken Wunderlich, and our address is 1680 Dry Creek Road. We actually live across the street from the proposed Great River site, and we wanted to call in and just show our complete full support for the proposed project. We are huge advocates for sustainability and regeneration, and we think that Russ and Stephanie Hargrave are visions of what that means, and that they would uphold any project to the highest standard with the highest level of efficacy and respect for the land. We really care about the area that we live in Mosier, and we notice all of the wildlife and the beauty of the area. And we think that that's one of the reasons why we really appreciate this project, is because we want to maintain the beauty of the land. We want to make sure that the environment is upheld and taken care of. And we think that this is a great project that will definitely be able to take care of the area. We also want to show support for the advocacy of the youth camp as well, bringing in youth to the area. I studied as a horticultural therapist, and I want to resonate with what Lisa just said as well. The lack of touch that children have with nature nowadays is so evident and so disturbing. Some of the kids that I used to work with didn't even know where tomatoes came from or how they grew. So I just know that there's a great lack of connection between nature and youth, and this is a great way to address that and be able to bring kids in and connect them more with nature. Also, understanding and kind of learning about the process of the circle of life, I think, is so important as well. So this is definitely a great way to be a witness of nature, the cycle of life, everything that goes into it, and just will help with the youth of the area so much. And yeah, we just want to show our full support, and we just can't wait to see it grow into what it's supposed to. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in favor of the proposal?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Tim Boogie. I live on 1965 Dry Creek Road, fairly close to the property. And for all the reasons stated by the other participants, I'm in favor of this proposal as well. Primarily for me is having an active, enthusiastic occupier owner of that property, somebody to keep it in good shape, as opposed to the way it used to be. And so I'm all for it.
Thank you, Tim. Anyone else wish to speak in favor of the proposal? Okay, I don't hear anyone else. Are there individuals with party status or members of the audience who wish to speak in opposition of the proposal? Unmute yourself and please state your name for the record.
Sheila Dooley, 3300 Vincel Road. And I just have some concerns. We live less than 2 miles away to the kind of the south-southeast, and it's less than 2 miles as the crow flies, and we could be affected by a fire that started here last summer. The Mosier Creek fire came up through this area and came to within a half mile of our house. This property is in an area of extreme fire risk with terrain and steep slopes that make it difficult and costly to fight fires. It would be really hard to contain a fire that started here, and it could easily spread into surrounding forest land. Conditions are dry and windy, and they just need an ignition source to start a fire. And then my other concern, there's a lot of forested areas to the south, to the west across Mosier Creek, and to the southeast again to Ken Thomas's forest land. And it could take 60 to 80 years to replace mature trees if they're destroyed by fire. It's also in the big game winter range. It's the unique pine oak habitat only found. It's the variety of species rely on. It's only found in certain areas of Oregon. And the only Oregon white oak in eastern Oregon is here in the gorge. If the application is approved, how would you ensure that the terms of the permit are enforced? Otherwise, a future landowner could decide to expand the operation beyond what was approved. I noticed there's 3 categories of participants: summer camp, outdoor school, and Mosier School. What if one of these decided not to participate at some point in the future? How would that affect this? And then I'm sure you also are Arthur Smith's email. He said that youth camps tend to expand after they have great success, and he cautions you to monitor the number of attendees. And is the county in a position to do this? Who would do this? Supervision of youth is needed to prevent them, especially from smoking at night. The Mosier Creek fire was supposedly started by somebody throwing a cigarette butt into a brush pile. The previous operation on this site closed due to a lack of water. And the application says both the uses will be used less than the 5,000 gallon per day limit. Let's see, the well log submitted with the application shows that when the well was drilled in 1975, it had 60 gallons per minute. Since then, it's dropped by more than 90% with a current capacity of 5 gallons a minute, according to the application. The previous site, previous operation closed due to a lack of water. Assuming the well hasn't been used in recent years, has not recharged, will the yield drop further when put back into use? Will there be enough available water to support this request? Is there a requirement for a water source other than just water stored on site? And I was just going to mention closing and looking at the comparison to other camps, they show Young Life. I know it's hard to compare them, but Young Life, it's on the old Big Muddy Ranch. It's a completely different setting. It's on the old Rashnishi site. Camp Morrow.
That's 3 minutes, Sheila.
Okay, doesn't meet the minimum requirements for a campground. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any wish to speak in opposition to the proposal? State your name and address for the record, please. And please don't provide testimony that you've submitted in writing.
Nobody's going to speak in opposition.
Unmute yourself if you wish to give testimony in opposition to the proposal.
Okay, I think the Barkers are trying to call in.
This time, does the commission have any questions for anyone that spoke in favor of or in opposition to? Okay, at this time, I'll offer the applicant the opportunity to rebut anything that was raised.
No, thank you, Lynn.
Okay.
Can you hear me
Is there any
now?
I'm sorry.
I don't know whether my audio is working. Can you hear me speaking now?
Yes. State your name and address.
Oh, okay.
Are you here?
My name is.
Are you speaking in opposition?
Am I here?
Are you speaking in opposition to
Yes,
the?
I am.
Go ahead.
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
My name is Jill. well, I don't know whether you can hear me. My name is Jill Barker. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Go ahead. Okay, my name is Jill Barker, and I'm very concerned about having a youth camp on a area that's of extreme fire danger, high winds, and an increased human activity in this setting is just a disaster waiting to happen. The property allegedly the well produces 5 gallons a minute, but the applicant says that it produces 30 gallons a minute. And I'm wondering why the well has not been tested and the logs aren't available for people to see. I don't think some of the testimony, some of the letters from the sheriff said that there's very little water at this site, and the last he knew, it only produced about 2.5 gallons a minute at best. So the water master said that if the applicant were to store water in a cistern, that would probably be enough. But I think that's very speculative. And I think that needs to be tested, the well, and proven that it is going to produce enough water to support this size of an activity. It may not seem large for the average youth camp, but it's large for this area. It's a lot of extra people and water usage for an area that's extremely dry. It's in a unprecedented drought. We're in having heat waves that are unprecedented, and it's a high fire risk area. And it just seems very foolish to develop something like this in an area that's so prone to extreme fire. Now, the other thing is that Mr. Hargrave said that he's going to reuse a lot of the infrastructure. Well, the infrastructure was built 46 years ago, and it is crumbled. It's old. Fires have passed through there and previously, and it's there's been theft of a lot of the electrical wiring. The whole thing was poorly planned to begin with, and it hasn't been used for about 12 years, and it's been vandalized in the meantime. So I don't see how the old infrastructure could be reused. The other thing is, I don't know, once, as Sheila pointed out, once you start using this well again, is it's still going to produce even the 5 gallons a minute? You know, most of the wells around this area, when they're used a lot, drop. Their water levels drop. The aquifer is dropping. It's being depleted. We're in an extreme drought. So this just seems like it's not thought out carefully. I don't think there's enough water on the premises to support a youth camp. There should be mandatory inspections of all these, the water system, the electrical system, the septic system, the perk system. And it hasn't been done that I know of. At least it wasn't in the application. And,
Okay,
and
thank
then
you.
who at the county level,
Jill, that's 3 minutes.
who's responsible for regulating all this at the county level?
Russell,
Thank you.
wish to, I'll go back and ask if you wish to rebut any testimony.
I don't feel there's time. I understand that the commissioners need to leave, and I feel I have covered all these points already. So no, thank you, Lynn.
All right, thank you. All right.
Thanks.
If there's, does the commission have any further questions for the applicant or staff before the record is closed? If not, then the public hearing is closed and the Planning Commission will enter into deliberation.
Good afternoon. I was just wondering if I could just rebut to what was just said as a part of the opposition regarding the use of the water. I just want to point out that we're surrounded by
Excuse me, sorry, excuse me, ma'am. You're not allowed to rebut testimony from other people. Thank you.
Okay, at this time,
Okay, sorry about
there will
that.
be deliberations, planning commission only, and the planning commission may ask questions of staff and the applicant, clarifying questions. No new information may be added unless the hearing is continued and a specific request is made to staff to obtain additional information for the planning commission's consideration. So, any further questions, planning commissioners?
I don't have
This
any
is
questions.
Vicki. I have some real concerns on the water pump recovery. I would like to see a 12 to 24-hour test done to see that if the pump, the well, can actually reproduce 5,000 gallons in a 24-hour period prior to this, so that this big water tank over a period of a week doesn't go dry because the pump can't supply enough water. It would be no fire protection, no water for the campers if that water supply keeps going down every day. And then I'm also concerned it wasn't addressed in the projections that there would be nighttime security checks. With youth out there in today's world, I think that should be a requirement that when youth are on camp, that there would be a full-time nighttime security check done, just for everybody's safety. No, those are my main concerns with fire and water.
I'd like to jump in there. This is Commissioner Mike Davis. Well, first of all, I do know that reading the whole document was that there is a youth camp director that's there all the time, okay? And they're responsible based on that, that document. So I'm not too concerned about that. So two is in regards to water. You know, obviously, Vicki, you and I live out in the, if you think that the forest is full of combustible material, it's definitely a concern for all of us. Now, that speaking with that, you know, I am a part of the National Fire program in regards to drones, and so I'm really fairly knowledgeable, not totally on wildfires anyway, I'm not. But there are formulas that if you're in a housing development of how much water is needed by the fire department. The problem is out here when you're in a open space, it is really more defined by proposals and working with the fire departments, and because there's no formula. Because as you know, as well as I do, that when a fire does really take hold, especially out in the Eastern Oregon, there's never enough water. So it's the good news that I think that you have here is that the owner has stayed very active with the Oregon State, the State Department, as well as the local department. And in storing 30,000 gallons, you can't just assume that you dump 30,000 gallons on the ground, you're going to get it instantaneously back. It just takes time. That means that he's probably constantly going to be pumping into these. But the bottom line is it's required by the conditions that they have that there. And since they've talking with the fire department already, I think that's adequate to move this thing forward. Now, the bottom line is that if we define the conditions of this and the staff has, then the owner has to live up to that. So we can't outguess if that 30,000 gallons is going to go away tomorrow, but we have to stipulate that they have to have that. Okay. I think that in both of those cases, it's not enough to deter moving forward on this. Now, my question is more of a one of moving forward here, because we have actually four different. We're not voting on one time. Is that correct, Lynn? We have to vote on the first one, second one. Is that correct?
We would be voting on them separately, but
Okay.
we would need to first address whether we want more information on the water issue.
Well, but that's the second one. The first one is about the property line adjustment replat. That's what we have to focus on first, because without that, nothing happens. Okay.
Right.
So what I would propose is, number one, I move that we with conditions, we approve the preliminary property line adjustment to replat plan based and with the conditions that the staff recommends. This has nothing to do with the youth camp yet. This is strictly the replat. So I move that we approve that.
Is there a second? Is there a second on the replat? Move adjustment of the property line.
I second that, Lynn.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, first motion is approved. Okay.
So if I can move this thing forward, in order to create discussion around the youth camp, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move that we approve the youth camp conditional use permit with the conditions that staff has recommended in option A, which really focuses a lot of conditions, including the water. So I propose that we approve the youth camp conditional use permit with the conditions that staff has recommended.
Do I have a second?
This is Commissioner Willis, I second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. You're on a roll, Mike.
So the next one is the cemetery conditional use permit, which is a lot of support on. So I would go ahead and move that we approve the cemetery conditional use permit with the conditions that the staff has recommended in option A.
I think there was one update to one of those conditions today.
Yeah, I think there was.
Yes. Okay. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Can I, Chair McIntyre, can I get a clarification? This is Commissioner Willis.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I believe that this was conditioned on having a final plat, having a final plat. Is that right?
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah. That is correct.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Fourth motion.
Okay, which is the last one, which is a cemetery subdivision plan. So I move that we approve the preliminary subdivision plan as submitted by the applicant with the conditions. Again, it ties in for the final, which is staff recommended in option A. So I move that we move forward with the subdivision plan with the staff condition as outlined.
Is there a second to the motion? Do I have a second to the motion?
This is Commissioner Ashley. I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay. Thank you very much. The proposals as submitted today were all approved with the conditions and findings as stated in the staff report and updated today. The appeal process to the, I'm sorry, this concludes the hearing, the appeal process to the Board of Commissioners. Notice of the decision will be mailed Thursday, July 8th, 2021. The appeal period is 12 days from the date of the mailing and will expire at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. As per ORS 197.830, if no appeal is filed, the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter shall be final. Director, is there anything further that you would like to bring forth to the Planning Commission?
Yeah, I can just give a really brief report on recruitment and transition, just so everybody's aware. We're going through some staff transitions, not unlike other organizations all across the country. For those of you who are unaware, Director Brewer left us last week to pursue a new opportunity in Deschutes County. So I will be stepping in as interim director for a minimum of 6 months and working to also fill some positions that we now have open as a result of some additional staff transitions. So you'll see in the coming months, lots of new faces, and we're really excited to Chris McNeil will be transitioning from code compliance over to our assistant planner. We'll also have another internal transition from another department into our department. And we'll be also staffing for our hazardous waste and recycling program as well. So lots of changes happening in the department. We're full steam ahead on the Ludo update. We have revised the scope of that work. So this year, and you'll be hearing it first in August and then September is the official hearing date. We'll be focusing predominantly on procedures and process documents. So things that are not necessarily as much substantive as much as the cleanup. And that will give us some additional time to get out into the public face-to-face to talk about some of the more optional updates. So we've shrunk this year's scope. We've lengthened the Ludo update scope by an additional year to allow us time to do that critical work. And so you'll be hearing that from us in September. In addition, in September, we'll be presenting the National Scenic Area Land Use and Development Ordinance update that is in response to the work that was done by the Columbia River Gorge Commission for Gorge 2020. If you'll remember, they had a concurrent management plan update with our comprehensive plan update. So lots of other work happening behind the scenes. We're continuing progress on our community wildfire protection plan. And we recently received tentative approval from the Department of Defense to pursue a military airspace overlay zone, which we'll be working on next year as a part of the Land Use and Development Ordinance update. Lots of other things on the horizon. I'm want to let the commission know as well. I am pursuing some folks for the vacant planning commissioner alternate position, specifically targeting the Petersburg area. We have not had representatives from the Petersburg area, although they've been really vocal participants in many of our long range activities. So we'd like to see somebody from that area really representing the folks from there. And it's a critical area. They've been impacted a lot by wildfire, and And it's a huge winter wheat farming area for the county. So we'll be working through that as well. That's all I've got for updates. I appreciate everybody hanging out a little bit past the time, and want to thank Daniel for all his really wonderful hard work on this application. And thank the commission for their forbearance today, and staying a little bit later, and also for being here today. You can imagine with Russ being the applicant, that put us in a little bit of a bind for quorum. So thank you for spending this evening with us. And I'm happy and available to answer any questions. Our open office hours currently are Tuesday and Thursday. So we're not open to the public any other days for that. And that's just because of the staffing transitions. But I am in the office and available if you want to call and have a chat with me. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your hard work. And this application was a huge one. And the details behind that you have with it was made our job a lot easier, and you guys did a fabulous job, and I appreciate it. So I'm gonna leave. So take care, and hope to see you in real life next time.
Yeah. We need a motion to adjourn then, if there's no further questions for Kelly. Or
I move that we close.
okay, second.
I second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly and Daniel.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you.
We'll see you soon.